Hi, everyone. My name is Deshni Devan. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been qualified for 26 years. I specialize or have a special interest in persistent pain. So I've worked in the area. I have my master's degree and a few postgraduate qualifications in this area. I also have treated people with persistent pain. So the reason we're here today is this is the third episode of my Pain Bytes podcast. And what the podcast is about is actually just conversations with people who suffer with persistent pain on a daily basis. And today I am going to interview another person with persistent pain. And the reason that we're doing these interviews or these conversations, actually, the reason I started it is I wanted to interview many people with persistent pain to look at their lived experience with pain, but to look specifically at the things that worked for them, the things that helped them in their recovery journey, so that we could learn from them and hopefully help other people with persistent pain that are hopefully going to be listening to the podcast to learn from their experiences and to try those things. And maybe those tools, those strategies, their lived experience will help you to live, a more complete life, to start your journey of recovery. So today we have Annie Livingstone, and she's a pain advocate who lives in the United Kingdom. And Annie suffers from or is diagnosed with osteoarthritis. She has spinal stenosis. She has fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, tinnitus, and irritable bowel syndrome. So she has had a significant amount of pain and persistent pain in her life to this point, and she still suffers with pain on a daily basis. So Annie is actually a pain advocate who works with Live Well with Pain, specifically in the Footsteps Festival. And she's currently working on a pain pathway for people with pain. And she's going to tell us more about that at the end of the podcast. So welcome, Annie. How are you today?
Not too bad. It's probably cooler here in the UK than it is with you.
Yes, we have temperatures in the high 20s and early 30s here in South Africa. So things are rather hot.
I was going to say, I bet they are.
Yes,
It's
yeah. So
12
we're
degrees
not
here.
wearing jackets. That's not happening here. Though that said, we should be going into cooler weather in the next month, I hope. So Annie, to start off our conversation today, what I would like to ask you is to tell the audience a little bit about, just because we want to set the context, just a little bit of where you were before your sort of recovery journey really started. So that space where, your life was centered around pain and you couldn't think of a way out and you were really struggling before things changed, before you got onto a path that led you to where you are today. Can you tell us a little bit about that space?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to regard it as my non-living years. I reckon I existed. A lot of that was due to copious amounts of pain medication, including several opiates.
Yeah.
I've done a graphic which totally says how I felt. In this country, I don't know whether you use this phrase, a couch potato, i.e. somebody that just sits on.
Yes,
well, I
we
used
do.
to call myself a sofa sprout, i.e. a Brussels sprout, because most people don't like them. And I've got a graphic all in very dark grey and of this sprout in a prison where everything is dark and you've got bars around you. And my bars are the pain. I couldn't break out. And I'm quite a visual person, so I tend to see things in pictures. And that was my life. I mean, bed and sofa and not much in between. And I just was not engaging with the family or friends. I had no social life. Life was pretty bleak. And you said a phrase earlier on about a black hole of pain, and that's exactly what it is. And not only is it a black hole, but there's no ladder.
Yeah.
So it's like falling down one of those mine shafts.
Yeah.
And not having the wherewithal to get out. You're
Yeah.
stuck and it's there, and it's very oppressive.
Yeah.
And you very rarely see any light. You
Yeah.
know,
So,
sometimes you might just get a little pinprick, but most
yeah.
of the time it's like a blackness that
Yeah.
surrounds you. So that's where I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, yeah. And I really like the way you described it. I like the fact that you said there were prison bars around, you know,
Mm,
the sofa sprout, because that's actually what it is, right?
mm,
So pain actually imprisons you. It keeps you in that space. Persistent
mm,
pain now. We're talking about persistent
mm.
pain for the audience. So it keeps you in that space. You actually can't, you feel so helpless, right? You feel like you're in a place where you're helpless, you don't have hope, you have no way out. And it's almost like someone has to throw you a lifeline. Someone's got to throw a rope down to the hole to get you out. And unfortunately, uh, that rope can come or it can't, as you know.
And
And
sometimes it comes and
sometimes,
it's not long enough. You know,
yes,
it gets
yeah,
so far, but it doesn't
yeah,
reach you.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that then you get frustrated, and your
yes,
depression gets worse. And I tell you,
yes,
I have an analogy, because as
yes,
a child, I went through the ice in a pond,
yeah,
but there were enough people around me who were able to lay on their stomachs and hike me out.
yeah,
What I felt with the pain was there was no one who could reach down, or nothing that could reach down and hike me out. I thought this was it, you know, and really, I didn't consider it a life. You know, you do go through that. Is it really worth me being here? Can I go on like this forever and a day?
yeah. And I get that, and I completely understand that. I've had many of my patients tell me that they've got to the end, you know, what more is there? Like how much worse can this get? They don't think it can
Mm.
get any worse than that. So I completely understand, you know, the picture that you've painted. So I
And
want
it
to
does
now,
get
yeah,
worse. That's the thing. The
yeah,
thing about it is that, it might not be actually it really getting worse, but your brain, I think, makes that assumption it's getting worse. So it's
yeah,
like a vicious circle, and it's that
yes,
downward spiral all of the time, you know.
yes. And isn't it amazing how powerful our brain is, right?
Mm,
So even if it isn't really getting worse, your brain is kind of going, it's getting worse. And so
yeah.
your brain and your body then just are like, okay, it's getting worse. This is, I didn't think it could get worse, but it's getting worse. So it is interesting how the brain does that. So if you're okay now, I would like to move on to more positive things
Yeah.
and to ask you, so now that you've described this horrible black hole, this prison of pain that you were in,
Mm.
what was the thing that started? Where was that light bulb moment where suddenly you kind of got an inkling, hang on a sec, this can change? Or what was the thing that started the journey of recovery for you that you could actually find your way out of that black pit?
Um, it wasn't one major thing, but it was a combination of a few things sort of weaving their way through my psyche and my thoughts and whatever.
Yeah.
One of them was I read, because I have ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. I read an article,
Yeah.
and it was about the spoon theory, about having, you know, you
Mm.
only have so many spoons and whatever. And
Yes.
that made me
Yes.
think, well, could you apply that to pain? Because obviously, if you do too much, it seems to increase the pain.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a light bulb, you know, a tiny little pinprick going
Yeah.
on.
It's kind of the thing that started you thinking
Yeah,
differently.
was that,
That
you know,
maybe I need to consider something else in terms of how besides the medication, because you were obviously on a lot of
I
medication.
was on huge amounts of
So
medication. And in
so you
fact,
were
I
thinking, well, maybe medication plus trying something
something
else
else,
might
yeah,
work. Yeah.
because I can also consider those years as my zombie years,
Mm.
because I was so, you know, just not with it.
Yeah.
I couldn't think straight. My family tell me my skin color changed. I was
Wow.
very, very sort of white and grey.
Mm.
And I couldn't follow a conversation. I was constantly, as they would say, spaced out. It affected my family as well as me. So I was aware that I was missing out on things like I didn't have the energy or the wherewithal to go to social events. So I was missing out on things to do with my grandchildren, which pained me enormously.
Yeah.
And then I had not been on social media. I hadn't succumbed. And so I signed up for what was Twitter then and Facebook. And I found these groups and they were talking about pain. And some were sort of wallowing, what I call wallowing in the pain. And others were quite optimistic and being very positive. And so that was another thing. But I suppose in reality, the main thing was that I was admitted to hospital with a severe bowel bleed brought on by my medication and damage to my liver. Sure. And while I was in hospital, the person that helped me most was the pharmacist, the hospital pharmacist. The senior pharmacist from the hospital came up and sat on my bed and gave me a chat about all these drugs I was taking. And he was the first person that said to me, you do realise you're doing yourself more harm than good with all this medication. And he went on to explain that he was the one that explained to me the difference between acute pain, like when you've broken your leg or you've pulled a muscle or something, and the pain that I was having with all of my diagnosis. And he was saying that, the medication that is being handed out these days, they have a view that while it's good for acute pain, for long-term pain, it's not good. So, how, I'm sure you're the same as me, when somebody says something like that, you think, I need to find out more. I need to read more about it. And also, he said, for safety reasons, I will not dispense your cocktail of medication. Wow. So he said to me, and he quoted 3 drugs, and he said, you cannot have those 3 together. He said, you'll end up doing something really serious, if not the slightest overdose, and you might not wake up the next morning. I think a lot of it was shock tactics, actually, but it worked.
Yes. So he basically was like, I'm cutting you off.
Yeah.
You're not getting these drugs anymore because they're bad for you.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, he did say this is going to be really difficult. He said, because normally in anything like drug rehabilitation, it's always the decreasing, the tapering or whatever. He said, but I cannot, in all good conscience. And he said, our rules don't allow it down in the dispensary. He said, I cannot give that one person those 3 drugs together. So that was a bit of a thing. So he talked to the consultant and decided which one they would withdraw instantly. And then they said, you seriously need to start tapering the rest.
Okay, so that was the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the journey, really.
So the beginning of the journey was actually kind of taking all of those drugs that you were on that were actually making you more disabled, it sounds like it, than anything else, that they were just adding to this horrible pain experience. So it was kind of starting with this horrible pain experience and all these drugs that were, like you said, it's interesting. One of my other interviews also called it the zombie years when she was on medication. So it seems like that's the term we're going to use. And that actually the stopping of the medication, or rather the tapering of the medication, was the beginning of the end for you, which is great. I mean, it's the beginning of the end of this horrible pain experience, but the start, it was also the start. It was the beginning of a new beginning of your journey to recovery.
Exactly. So and I think that in this, I do feel that what wasn't told to me or my family was that it would be like going cold turkey, even though it was a gradual decrease.
Yeah.
The effect of on your body after so long.
Yes.
And my partner says, and I won't actually use the words he says, but I will put it politely.
Yes.
He says, you were so difficult and unpleasant to live with.
Yeah.
During those months of tapering and coming off those drugs.
Yeah, because your body has gotten used to all of the substances coming in, right? And it has on some level, because you weren't addicted to them, but on some level, your body became dependent on getting that level of substance, you know, of drugs into your system, you know, good or bad.
Yeah.
And so when you kind of stepped away and you started tapering, your body wasn't ready for the shock of, we're now going to just remove this one and this one and this one. And every month we're going to remove another one. And your body's kind of going, what are you doing? I can't cope, because it's gotten used to having the zombie mode, right? And now we're switching off the zombie mode. And the problem is the zombie's not ready to leave.
Yeah, exactly.
The zombie still wants to stay, and you kind of going, no, zombie, your time's up. We're done. You're leaving. This is your ticket out of here. You have to go now. There's the door. We've opened the door. You need to go. Yeah. So I appreciate it. It must have been really difficult. And I think it will be difficult for anyone who has been on a large number of opioids, on a large number of really strong pain medication that I see a lot of my patients put on anyway. And I agree. I think it is a very difficult time for you. So well done on you on getting through that.
Thank you. But I
well
also
done.
think, you know, as I say, the impact on the family was horrendous. I was so short-tempered.
Yeah.
You know, nobody could talk to me without me snapping. And I just felt so wound up all the time, you know. So I think that that's something that needs to be taken into account, and maybe a little bit more of a support system needs to be in place when you're tapering.
Agreed.
Because I think
I agree that's important.
And I also think that all the time you're taking the medication, you're thinking, oh, well, that's lessening the pain. And so, of course, the minute they say you've got to come off the pain medication, or you should, or we're going to taper you, or whatever, I think you then go into a sort of panic and fear, because you're thinking, oh, crumbs, I can't bear my pain now. What's it going to be like? You know, what am I going to have to live with?
And that's an important point, Annie, because I mean, many of my patients, I've always asked my patients, so how is the medication helping? And often my patients, even though they are on like probably 3 or 4 drugs, if not more, at the time that I see them initially, will say, yeah, it helps, but it doesn't really help that much. You know, it helps, but I'm still in pain. It helps, but I'm still struggling. It helps, but, you know, it's taking the edge off, but it doesn't really do more than take the edge off. And then it has all these unfortunate side effects. So it is difficult. I think it is difficult. And I'm by no means advocating no medication. I do think that medication has a place and a role, but I also think that we need to think as healthcare providers very carefully about the amount of drugs and how we prescribe and how we taper, you know, that whole conversation. That's the conversation for another day. But I think that needs to happen. I think we do need to think differently about it, because it is difficult. It's difficult for the person. Yeah, it's difficult for the person receiving it. It's difficult for the person prescribing it, probably because they don't actually know what to do. And that's possibly why they're adding one and another and saying, well, if I give her more, you know, it will help. But then it doesn't work, right? So no, that's
well,
not
I don't know what it's like in South Africa, but certainly here, I think there are a lot of prescribers, or, you know, doing prescriptions for pain, who actually themselves don't understand chronic pain. And so the only thing they know or think they know is the medication will ease the pain, without understanding that, of course, the pain is so much more complex than that.
Absolutely.
And so many more issues cause the pain and whatever. And it isn't like that biomedical approach.
Yes.
Is not the be all and end all of managing chronic pain. And I think that's a training gap. I think more needs to be done around that, which, of course, with the work that I do with Live Well with Pain as a lived experience trainer, that you know, that's what we're trying to say to people. We need something additional to just pain medication in order to do this. And the other thing I wanted to mention, because this to me is another key area, and that is you need a purpose. And I think when you're in the zombie phase, you have no purpose, you have no you can't focus, you have no. And for me, it was COVID, surprisingly enough, because in the UK there was a big call out for people to help make scrubs for the hospitals and the hospices, and our county, Somerset, did that too. And believe it or not, over 1,000 people answered the call. Not all of us could sew, but I could sew, and I did have all the equipment, but I hadn't used it for years and years and years. And what really spurred me on is that my cousin here in the UK was one of the first to die of COVID in hospital.
Oh, gosh.
And you know, like that hit me home, because he was younger than me. He was 51, and I thought to myself, I need to do something. And I come from a family of people that have always volunteered, you know. So I thought, well, yes, I'm in pain and I can't do anything, but I am a little bit more aware now. My medication is a little bit less, you know, I can get up in the morning and do things. So I started making scrubs. And if you want the biggest light bulb, really, from starting to come off the medication, that was it, because I learned that while I was focusing and doing and completely in the moment of the sewing and why I was doing it, my pain went backwards. Instead of being here, it went here. But it took me several days. It might have even been a couple of weeks before. And I think it was my partner saying, for somebody that's in a lot of pain, you certainly do a lot of sewing. And I thought, yeah, I do. Now, how can I do that?
And I wonder why that is. Why can I suddenly sit at the sewing machine for hours and sew when before I couldn't sit at all? What is going on here?
Exactly. So that then made me think about focus and purpose, and doing something for others. And on all of the ones I've done, or the ones I did, I wrote, I have a little bit of an embroidery thing on my sewing machine. So I used to put in NHS hero or thank you or something like that. So that it would go off and they'd have on their, here, NHS hero, you know,
that's nice.
Or a little on their the rope, call it rope, I can't remember, tape that ties the trousers up. They'd have thank you or something like that. And I just felt I was doing something for a real reason. And what I didn't know at the time, my grandson, who was a healthcare assistant at the hospital, had offered to work in the COVID ward because he was young, he wasn't married, he didn't have a family. And I've thought to myself often, I wonder if you ever had one of my one of my scrubs on or whatever. So that gave me a bit of a warm feeling, but I didn't know that until after we were over it. And we also had special sort of orders from the children's ward. So we were all going around the charity shops buying up children's duvets.
I'm sure.
And making tops, so they had Mickey Mouse or Superman or
nice.
So that the
great
kids,
idea.
Yeah, and we still get orders at Christmas and things like that to make them.
Great idea.
But I think it was that, and also the other thing that came out of that is I belonged to a community, so I had social connection. Which I hadn't had for years.
That's
and
powerful,
years
right?
and
How
years.
powerful is that? How powerful is that connection? It really is that because pain promotes social isolation, like you spoke
Yeah,
about earlier. It promotes it. It almost like encourages the social isolation. And you start off first by avoiding a few things, right? Your world was this big. And you started
was
having pain, and
small.
your world shrunk a little bit,
Yeah,
and then the pain persisted and it shrunk a little bit more, and then the pain keeps going, and then eventually you end up being here.
yeah.
It's just you, and there's nothing else left, you know. So that social isolation, I think, is so important for us to realize. Actually, we need to slowly push out. Yeah,
Yeah.
slowly reach the fingers out again to touch somebody else, to have some connection, because it's so important. I think social connection is so important. Absolutely agree with you so much. Yeah.
So that was it. So those sorts of things trickled in, not all
Yeah.
together, not in
Yeah.
the same month,
Yeah.
over probably 18 months.
Yeah.
And then it was those that had taken root in my brain.
Yeah.
And so I started to reach out for what else I could do to keep this momentum, because
Going.
I was benefiting. I had
Yes.
something to talk to my family about.
Yeah.
I could laugh again.
Yes.
I
Well,
laughed for
yeah.
ages.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
had enthusiasm, which I hadn't had.
Yes.
So all
Great.
those things little were trickling back into me. And
Yes.
I thought, maybe the sun will shine again.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, as I had begun to spread the bars out.
Yep.
Still a bit of darkness, but if I carried on this corridor, I'd get to the door and I'd get outside, and it would be all green and lush and the sun.
Mm.
And it was a suddenly I had a world of possibilities.
Yes. And you had hope, right?
Buckets.
Yeah.
Suddenly,
Yeah.
there was this, as you say, a bucket with hope on it, and these little
Mm.
chinks were going in, the little pebbles
Yes.
in and
Yes.
in and in and in, and it,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it was a grain of sand, not always a big thing, but
But
as
that
far as
little grain of sand
yeah,
helps.
of course it does.
Every little grain, every little bit, no matter how small, helps, because it all fills the bucket, right? And
Yeah,
that's all you need. You just need stuff to keep going in to fill the bucket. Yeah.
yeah,
So
and it was also
yeah.
about this time that you start to hear these words about self-management and whatever. I'd done a pain management program which really didn't light my bulb at all. I
Yeah.
think I was in too much pain. I wasn't in the right frame of mind. And I think that's important as well. You have to do these things sometimes when you're ready to listen. So I had got to a time, or a juncture when I was prepared to read and listen to, could I help myself? Could I have my own pain spoon theory?
Mm. Mm. Absolutely. I like it. I like it. The pain spoon theory. We'll call it Annie's pain spoon theory. I like it.
So yeah, and then as I say, the rest is almost history, really. My
Okay.
life is different. So
Yeah. So Annie, just thinking back now to all that you've said now, what would be the top 3 spoons in Annie's spoon theory about pain that got you on your recovery journey? What are the top 3 things?
I think understanding the difference between acute pain, i.e., something from an accident that will heal, and chronic pain that may be there for the middle, long term, or forever. I think
Yeah.
that was really important, and nobody had explained that to me, because all what I kept thinking with this medication was, one day the pain will go away because that's what happens when you take the pills. Yeah. So
and that's a valid thought. That's how we all think about pain, right? Unless you've had persistent pain, you do think that. You think I've got a headache, I take it's what in our country is called Panado or paracetamol, and it's going to go away.
Exactly. And I think that that had never been explained to me, not in any of the pain management programs. And in fact, I went to the pain management programs in the days when they said, if your pills aren't working, ask for more, sort of thing. So that was the underlying, my underlying understanding was you take more pills and eventually the pain will go away. Absolutely. Almost like, you know, if you have an infection, you take an antibiotic. So my pain meds were my antibiotic for my pain.
Absolutely. No, understand that. So that's number one. What would be number 2 and 3?
Well, self-management program. And I think that's important because within the self-management program, you have lots of topics and lots of factors. And what it does do is, if it's a really good one, and I have to promote the 10 Footsteps because I do believe it is an excellent one, is that it looks at all the areas in your life. And all of those, to my mind, are as important. But for some of us, some are more important. So for me, one of the most important ones is sleep, because I have lived with insomnia for years and years. And I think I started to understand that there were 2 types of fatigue or tiredness or whatever. I understood the fatigue I had through my ME CFS, because I'd lived with that since I was 40, and I'm now 75. So I've lived a long time with it, and I sort of recognized signs of that. But the weariness and the tiredness that you get when you don't sleep is something completely different. Now, and they both sap your energy, but the being tired through lack of sleeping is, for me, the thing that was stopping me really entering wholeheartedly the self-management program. So I needed to get that sorted out. So that's what for me, that's what self-management did, is it made me it let me highlight the areas that I needed to address in order to be able to keep going on this pathway, this journey, wherever I was going with it, to improve. So for me, a big one was sleep. And now I actually say sleep, for me, was the cornerstone of the whole of my ability to be able to take on board self-management. For other people, it may well be, you know, having to get over the grief of losing their job. You know, if they've been employed and then can't be employed anymore, that might be the biggest hurdle, that they're so consumed by what they've lost. That needs to be addressed first.
And that's a reality, you know, that's a reality that many people live with. Absolutely. So is there a third one?
Yes, there is.
We've
touched on it.
Yes.
Social connection and focus and purpose.
Yes.
Ta-da!
Yes.
And that is the thing that has given me personally such great rewards, and has made me absolutely passionate about that's the way forward for people with pain. And maybe now I've been on my journey, I sometimes think that needs to come first. That social connection, the socialization, the peer support, belonging, that being part of a tribe. I know that, I don't know how people think of that word, but where you've got a common theme, something that affects all of you, and where you're with a group of people where you don't have to quantify or qualify what you're saying. It's understood.
Yeah, they just get it. They get it.
Exactly. And if someone says, I'm having a bad day, that's it. They are having a bad day. You know, there's none of this, oh, well, you know, you need to change your mindset, and because they know that's what they need to do, you know, but we all have bad days, but doesn't everyone?
Exactly.
And that's the thing. It's about normalizing. A lot of it is normalizing the what the feeling and your emotions and whatever, given your diagnosis, those things are normal.
Yeah.
So that's okay. And also that when you belong to a group with you know, the similar challenges and whatever, and you create a safe space, it gives that confidentiality, so you can vent, you've got somewhere to go. You know, when sometimes your family don't understand, you know, there are people that will listen and won't judge you and won't make trite comments and be supercilious and all those sorts of things. So that's and the more I'm going along on this journey, the more I'm believing that that's where we need to start. So at the moment, there's this big emphasis on the biopsychosocial model. I and a few of my colleagues and friends want to change that into a social psycho-bio model.
And I agree with you. I fully believe that. I'm definitely a supporter of that. I think that the social connection, for me, from what I've seen with my own you know, clients, the people that I've treated with pain, the social connection is so important. It's often the one thing for me that I've seen in my experience where people, if they lose the social connection or if there's a problem in their social context, that's often where the wheels come off. That's often where things get worse, you know, where if they get more social connection and more support socially, I find that they can be stronger, they can be more resilient, they can find a way. But the moment you start taking away that social connection, I find people really struggle. That's been my experience too. Yeah.
Can I tell you a little story about one person that comes to my group? Well, she came to us about a year ago, very broken. She'd had CBT because of anxiety of leaving the home. Had really become a recluse. And someone gave our Footsteps Facebook page details to her, and she came along and she didn't say anything, and I thought, oh goodness, what have I got myself into? But she came again. Do you know she's now leading the sessions?
Wow.
She keeps our diary. She bosses us around, and it is the most brilliant transformation that you could possibly imagine. And if anyone says to me, you know, why do you do what you do? You're not paid, you're a volunteer, it takes up 7 days a week. You know, you're there for your group really 24/7. That and she's not alone. The reason I tell you her story is because the growth has been amazing, and she's just so fabulous. So she's got lots of ideas. She sometimes, you know, she can run things on the Facebook page as well. She's just, I mean, just watching her and listening to her. And when she makes a suggestion, and her suggestion to me will be, I'm wondering, or I suggest, or do you think, which is really her saying to me, this is what we're going to do. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think, crumbs, that is so wonderful. And that has come from peer support.
Yeah.
Coming to a group of people, all
absolutely.
pain.
Yes.
You know, we don't have any medical input. We don't have any qualified counsellors or anything. We are all people living with peer support, and that growth and that change in her behaviour and the way that she sees the world. She's now quite outward looking, whereas before she was totally inward looking.
Yeah.
How
and
powerful!
Isn't that beautiful? How powerful and beautiful that is. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to share that because she was someone that I really did wonder whether this would work for her. But boy, has it worked.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But we have many. We have
I'm sure.
And we even have some men. Which is, you know, sort of in these sorts of environments, you often get mainly women. But, so we're lucky. We have all ages. And I just think, you know, it's that social connection of all these wonderful things that can transpire from just meeting together. And it's always online in our case. And we are because we're not just in one small network area or regional area. So so I just thought I'd share that with you, because that might give some people listening to this the fact that, you know, there is hope and there is something that can be done and change can happen.
Exactly. No, agreed. Absolutely, exactly. So we're out to the last question. And so the last thing I want to ask you is, if you were faced with someone who is in that dark hole, who now has to find a way out, right? And they're looking for the rope and the rope's too short, what would be the one thing? The one thing that you would say do differently? Yeah, I thought so.
Absolutely. Because it can start all the other things. Because with support, we do have people that are tapering off their medication, which they would never, I don't think they would have done or chanced it, but they know we're there to support them. And also, sometimes you need to have the hope and a bit of self-confidence before starting a self-management program. So for me, it is the social connection. You've actually clarified it in my mind. I've always believed that, but I've always thought, now, how do I put this into words where it can be, I can emphasize it? And you've just helped me do that. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad. Okay, so we've come to the end of our podcast. So at this stage, I just want to give you some time to talk a little bit more about what you're doing in terms of the pain pathway.
Right. Well, I live in Somerset, which is in the southwest of England. And we are pushing forward and rolling out what we call pain cafes. Cornwall, which is the most southerly county in the UK, started over a year ago, and that comes back to the social connection. And from that, here in Somerset, we believe that there's a project to be put forward and for us all to work on, where it doesn't matter where you are in your pain journey, or be it a pathway, because that's what we think, you can get onto it. So that all of the things that can be offered, whether they be structured through sort of medical appointments and through a formal pain management program, or whether they can be informal through a pain cafe, and anything in between, it can all filter into this pathway, and that all of the stakeholders that we have in the county offering support for people with underlying health reasons because of their chronic pain, we can all work together. So our single focus is to make improve the lives of people with chronic pain. So there's an organisation in Somerset called Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership who do sterling work, absolutely sterling work, and they run programmes for using the Live Well with Pain 10 Footsteps programme. But like most of these programmes, there comes an end, and then what happens? And so some people would go back to that isolation. So they could hop onto the pathway at the end and go to a pain cafe. So it's that sort of having long-term meaningful support at wherever you are in your stage. And for some people, pain cafes may actually, the social connection might be the first stage in the route. And for others, it'll be the one that when they've completed everything they can do, they come to in order to keep the support going and keep their motivation to be on that pathway. The other thing I do is I run a Facebook group called Footsteps Festival, Create and Chat. And that yet again is about socialisation. And that's about using creativity, which I'm also quite passionate about, as a way of people doing something whereby their pain takes a bit of a back seat because they're involved in the moment. And we do all sorts of, on a Tuesday, we call it Mindful Tuesday. So that session is around things that quieten the mind, like doodling, tangling, neurographic art, where things are very slow and gentle. Wednesdays is the main create and chat, show and tell, where people come along with whatever they are doing, and if they don't have to bring anything, but where we discuss all sorts of things. And I don't think they always understand it or realise it, but the way my mind works is they are all linked to the 10 Footsteps or that sort of self-management program. So we sort of talk about something that might be of benefit for all of us. And then we have a Thursday club which explores different creative skills, and sometimes we have to learn them ourselves to share them, so that's always a bit of fun. The more I do it, the more I'm absolutely convinced that's the way forward for people with chronic pain. I have the absolute good fortune that I'm allowed to go down to Cornwall to speak at some of their pain cafes. So I'm learning from the best. So Somerset should be in safe hands. And I think that's another thing, is we mustn't keep reinventing the wheel. If someone's got something, good practice, and it's working.
Exactly.
Copy it.
Use it. Use it. Why not? As long as they're okay with you using it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely use it, you know.
And I take part in research because I think that's incredibly important. And I'm all for widening the research involvement pool, because we know that it doesn't always represent
the lived experience.
Lived experience, because there are some socioeconomic groups that don't take part in research because they, you know, who can read the blurb before you sign up for a research project, because you're talking about literacy levels. And that brings in something else, because I was an adult literacy and numeracy specialist, so that also works in with what I'm doing, trying to make, with my team and people that I work alongside and colleagues and others in this field, I just want something that is so accessible to people living with pain. So nothing stops them being involved as a research partner, so that they can eventually end up being involved in running sessions or helping to co-run a pain cafe, because they've gone so far in their journey and they have so much to give back. So that's where I'm at. It's all, and it's incredibly exciting, exhausting. I think I work harder now than I did when I was at proper work. And for
Isn't
which
it always the way?
I do not get paid.
For your passion and purpose, isn't it always the way?
Yeah. But I get rewarded from, like the story I told you earlier, and I get rewarded from seeing, you know, that through what we do is we facilitate people to take ownership of their lives again. And you can't ask for more than that, can you?
You can't ask for more than getting your life back. You cannot.
Yeah, exactly.
Not for someone who suffers with persistent pain. I don't think there's anything more precious than trying to get your life back.
So I'm rewarded all of the time. It's just that, yeah, and it is exhausting. And sometimes I just wonder why I'm doing all this and whatever. And then, as I say, something crosses your path and you realise that, we did good.
Yeah.
We did good. So
yeah.
And I just want to say to anybody who's listening to this, who lives with chronic pain, who lives in that dark cell I was in, it is absolutely possible to widen those bars and just put your toe out. And when you've got your toe out, your foot will follow. And as one foot goes out, the other one will come through.
Absolutely.
And what you do need to do, though, I think if you don't have, some people do have it within themselves, you know, they do get their own light bulb moment, but others need to have their hand held, and that's okay. It's not a sign of weakness if you can't do this on your own. We do not, you know, I don't expect anybody to do it on their own. I mean, I've always been quite lucky because I've got a partner who isn't always say the right things, but his heart's in the right place and he does support me, although he doesn't like it when I seem to be very tired. But then that's caring, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And social connection again.
I mean, I can be absolutely, completely and utterly exhausted, and then somebody will you know, just send me a text or a post about something they've been doing, and I'm energized again. It's weird, isn't it, how the body reacts to something, you know, like a positive piece of news, and you think, oh yeah, that's good, I like that. So there's that's what I've been doing, that's what I am doing, and goodness knows where the future leads me.
Only good things, Annie, only good things. I believe it, absolutely. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all your sharing of your experience. I'm pretty sure it's going to help hopefully more than one person really, you know, look differently at their journey with pain and their recovery journey. I want to just let everyone know that if you want to get in contact with Annie, you know, she is available on the Footsteps Festival through Live Well with Pain, but you can also, by all means, email me and I'll give you her details. My email is info@paincoachsa.co.za. But thank you again, Annie. It was great chatting to you, and I'll hopefully chat to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been lovely to chat to you too.